Hello, and welcome to the 17th edition of Science, Metaphysics, and how it could explain that we are a computer simulation. The goal being a player that can respond to his karma in such a way that results in all win-win relationships. This was shown in the previous script involving Capricorn 10 and Saturn. We now enter the strange world of Aquarius, Uranus, and the strange number 11. Capricorn season has the shortest days and the longest nights, yet Aquarius is the coldest time of the year. In Leo times, we had the positive use of air in support of fire to reduce intense heat. In Aquarius, we have the negative use of fire in support of air, reducing intense cold. Leo times deals with bringing vegetation to flower. Matter is consumed to elicit volatile compounds such as fragrances from flowers. Aquarius time deals with destruction of all living things. Air puts out fire, forcing it back into matter, the earth. Time is not ready for fire as air runs free. During this time, fire is small relative to air, resulting in movements, creating wind, intensifying the cold. While air in small quantities relative to fire produces reflection and heat. Wind creates a barrier between earth and spirit. Air is in command, making everything barren. Everything is forced to go deep within it as time of isolation. Aquarius has the social conscience needed to create a paradigm shift. They are humanitarians, philanthropic, and keenly interested in making the world a better place. They are also quick to engage others in this process, which is why they have so many friends and acquaintances. Aquarius showers the world with their thoughts and new ideas. Their thought process is inventive and original. While Aquarians are happy to bestow their ideas as a gift with no strings attached, they are much happier when the rest of the world agrees with them. Naysayers will quickly find out that Aquarians can be impatient, even temperamental, with those who disagree. These folks can be quite fixed in their opinions, in keeping with the fixed quality assigned to this sign. The fact that these folks can think creatively and innovatively is one of their greatest assets. Water bearers are all about progress and technology. They love the latest gadgets, computers, and next generation technologies. Thanks to a genius that borders on insanity, those born under this sign have the unique ability to present ideas that will revolutionize the world. Their approach in doing so many be unpredictable, impersonal, and at times cold. While Aquarians are generally sympathetic and compassionate, they like it when things go their own way. Aquarians treasure their many friends and acquaintances and want to give back as much as they can. The great strength of the Aquarian borns are their vision, intellect, and humanity. They are determined to make the world a better place and to help everyone they can along the way. They are truly the trailblazers of the zodiac. Aquarius 11 is an air sign. Air deals with reflections. In Libra, we saw a mirror reflecting replicas of the subject. Here we get a reflection of its opposite, while in Gemini, we get the synthesis as a thought. Aquarius has the ability to reflect the opposite picture to fire, creating the power to drive fire back within the earth. This is the power of Aquarius for destruction of life forces, the power to make barren by destroying fire above the earth. Air is the absence of light and heat, being cold and dark. Earth becomes invisible without light and heat. Being invisible has many advantages. It is much easier to observe others' lighted objects when you are invisible. It's possible to see any changes. When invisible, the observer does not disturb the observed. Aquarius 11 is a fixed sign, hence power, the power of repulsion. The repulsion comes from driving fire back into the earth. This creates a vacuum and produces wind. Wind carries thought. These thoughts travel to faraway places, renewing and cleansing the earth, similar to a storm refreshes the earth. The air has passageways to all corners of the earth. They arrive as intuitive thoughts, which are available to all who can connect to them. Aquarius power lies in the ability to produce a vacuum, drawing in other energies. Aquarius is a masculine sign, but like Gemini, it is not overly masculine. Ideally, it is androgynous. Masculinity implies a desire. Any desire here would be to put out fire, which stands in the way of freedom. It creates a vacuum for the holy Adam, John the Baptist. This is the energy to transcend personal relationships for the love of humanity, the greater good, and so forth. Aquarius is the opposite of Leo. Leo is the Hosanna for fire, the force that wants to conquer the universe. Aquarius is the standard bearer of air, that force which desires freedom from fire. Leo wants to win. Aquarius does not want to win or lose. It just doesn't want to play. Leo's power draws in satellites, entities that seek light for protection. Aquarius power lies in putting out the light of the sun, thus freeing the satellites to bring out their own inner light and become sons of their own. The 11th house deals with becoming invisible. Being invisible is the ability to shine light on others and be in the shadows. This can only be achieved by detaching from the ego. This includes detaching from any emotions that support the ego. When this is achieved, we become invisible to the experience that is being presented. To be totally invisible gives the ability to see the drama without disturbing. This is freedom, which is sought after in this house. This is the house of friends. Friends imply freedom from the sex of the players. It can be intense while being non-sexual. Again, the house of Aquarius strives for freedom from duality as expressed in sexual relationships. Freedom from sexuality offers a challenge in the house of friends. We must transcend our ego in situation with groups of friends. This ego is used would strive to be the sun and the others surrounding you. When we have a group of friends, it allows for periods of detachment so as to watch and observe. This is the distinction between this and the 7th house of one-to-one intimacy. The cusp on the 11th house is the energy that has to be freed from duality. It needs to be awakened to a new way to express itself. This is the house of excitement that comes from mental stimulation resulting from detachment from the ego. This house is opposite the 5th house of striving to be on stage. While this house, you strive to sit in darkness observing. The challenge, of course, is to be choiceless, being in the light and being observed, or in darkness and observing. To always choose one over the other leads to many problems. Again, be choiceless and let the situation dictate which house to be in. Going out beyond Saturn, in the absence of light, brings us to Uranus. We are at the brink of the old and ancient solar system. This barrier of Saturn protects the individual. Uranus represents the awakener of the shadow. Saturn grew impatient, waiting to inherit the throne from Uranus. He declared war and castrated Uranus. The castration removed his presence in the active or masculine world, meaning the vibrations of Uranus comes only through intuition. The planet Uranus had its castration in a collision with something causing it to tilt 90 degrees or square to the ecliptic. As such, it would be all or nothing. Uranus ushered in a new age into the world. It was discovered at the same time as the French and the American Revolution. Before this time, humans were slaves to their karma. If your father was a blacksmith, you became a blacksmith. The birth of Uranus awakened us to lofty thoughts that we could be free from our karma. As mentioned, it is the nature of spirit to be born in all the unusual places, dense matter and bones, the home and marrow, the birth of new blood cells, high spiritual beings coming from places no one ever heard of, Nazareth. The waking of new consciousness comes through lead, that like barrier of Saturn. Through the shadows emerges a new consciousness. Uranus gives us a view through our intuition and brings reality to an event horizon, like going to the North Pole and the end of that duality. 1/2 becomes 1/0. 2 in the yin becomes 0. Throughout these sessions, I've used the seasons and the 4 variables to describe the scripts the players act out. For review, at point A, we meet and love blooms, and it is maximized at point B. This is the end of the honeymoon and the beginning of the workshop and the relation. Shadows and problems emerge out of the subconscious. At point C, the relationship is tarnished and its serious problems develop. At point D is the end and demands a quantum jump towards win-win relationship or an end, along with the remorse and loneliness until you meet your new soulmate at point A. This cycle spans time and is measured by Saturn. Before Uranus was discovered, a relationship was expected to last a lifetime. To some today, many still last a lifetime, but for many, not so. What Uranus has done is to manipulate time so as remove the curve closer together. The yin curve of Saturn has shifted to an all-nothing curve of Uranus. What Uranus is doing is literally driving us crazy from total hot to total cold in an increasingly shorter time, leading to schizophrenia. The placement of Uranus in the chart indicates a place of heavy structure. The structure covers a nest of ego addictions. What Uranus does is to create a reality where that structure is removed. Like a shot, we are propelled to the heights of ego glorification and once again think of ourselves as God. When we identify, we fall from the heights back to the cold structure of Saturn. We have a brief peek at what it could be. Recall the 3 potential ego states. They are represented by these columns. The size of the column indicates the relative amount of conscious awareness of a particular ego state. There is a masculine and feminine side where their sexual orientation dictates their state preferences. In the middle, we have the androgynous being that is choiceless between its masculine or feminine side. This is what we are all striving to become, and Uranus is helping us get there. Saturn is a barrier placed on the inferior side. By inferior, I mean the side which has the lesser consciousness, e.g., masculine on the feminine side and vice versa for the male. Visualize the barrier placed there so as to be the rock that the individual has to push up the hill. Saturn barrier is there for a reason, and we have to push hard to gain that consciousness. There is a structure that must be observed. That structure is placed there to protect us from going overboard on an addiction. We tend to think of Uranus energy as forward thinking. In actuality, it is reverse thinking. It just allows us to touch onto something we may have grasped from the past. It may be inventions, New Age consciousness, or other concepts, but it's probably thought of before. When we identify with the ego, we identify with these past structures, or past pictures. When we identify, the Saturn pattern returns. Hopefully, what we have learned from the experience is a connection, a picture of a higher consciousness that we once had. This will give us a direction so that we have a goal as we work through the Saturn barrier. The Uranian processes which remove Saturn barriers and then reaffirms it happens over and over again until the person goes crazy or learns to detach from the ego. Thus, Uranus acts like a jackhammer, smashing away at the barrier while Saturn works at resealing it. Uranus works outside the barrier, outside of time. When we are at the height of Uranus, time stands still and is the reason why it is so exciting and addictive. We all strive for timelessness. It is like being in love. All the moments of the past and the future are lumped into now. It is a Uranian high. We are free from duality. At that moment, Uranus smashes away at our structures. During the destructive process, we are frustrated going from the highs to the low. We love the highs but hate the lows. During the lows, we feel like we are in a slump causing depression. We long for that feeling of freedom from duality. Thus, the sign in the house that Uranus occupies is the arena where there are movements of highs and long periods of lows, while Uranus works on the barrier. What Uranus is doing is paving the way like John the Baptist by destroying to provide a passage for the avatar. The first area must be made to look like rubble. Only in mud will the lotus grow. So Uranus converts his house into rubble so as to make the proper environment for the holy atom to emerge. In the Saturn-Uranus planetary pair, Saturn is yang, building structures to protect the organism from dangerous outside influences, while Uranus plays the in role of destroying the barrier to make an entry for the Christ consciousness. Both of these planets work in darkness. Visualize Saturn working on the barrier and Uranus comes for a visit, bringing new consciousness. He is equipped with the jackhammer, but first he whispers, "Wake up." Most of the time we don't hear the whisper, since it comes from an area we strive to hide. If your Uranus isn't heard, then he speaks louder and louder until he is forced to use the jackhammer. This becomes dangerous work because it can crumble the personality. The degree of smashing will determine how much of the personality has crumbled. Drastic crumbling can seriously affect the personality to the point that it may not be able to function without help. Saturn is the force that protects the individual. When impacted by the forces of Uranus, Saturn must work to reseal the barrier. So ideally, Uranus is smashing at the barrier and Saturn is sealing it back. Uranus travels through a sign in 7 years. This is the time it takes to smash away any structure regarding that sign. So by the end, it is purged by any ego identification. Recall, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto move so slowly that their positions affect an entire generation. Thus, each generation will have these planets in the same sign. Because of their slowness, they act on the generation and not specifically on the individuals. They are termed the transpersonal planets. In the future sessions, the personalities of the 7 generations starting from 1927 to the present will be examined using these planets. Only if they aspect our personal planets will they influence us in a personal way. Flowing aspects to Uranus means that the subject planet will pick up the vibrations of Uranus with just a whisper and no jackhammer needed. Stressful aspects to Uranus means he will need the jackhammer. Such individuals will experience long periods of depression waiting for that short-lived high. This could mean tearing away of the personality, leaving a person needing help so as to get a grasp on reality. The question, why was there so much structure preventing hearing the message? Uranus is the awakener. It works with cooperation with Saturn to bring light where darkness prevails by giving flashes of insight to an earlier time when Saturn's barriers weren't there. This exciting flashback allows us to be free from the barrier for a time. It offers a challenge to live in a timelessness without identifying with ego patterns. In most cases, we fall and then we are forced to return to the barrier of Saturn and duality. All too often, we live in the lows wishing for the highs. It renders us a forward-thinking people, wishing for that high to keep us going. So for over 200 years of Uranus, it has made us more attentive, more forward-thinking, but less satisfied with the now. It has tried to break Saturn barriers, made us hungry for something out there, something beyond this world. In a negative way, we have become addicted to excitement happening in the future, while the now is dull. Also, it makes us desolate because there is nothing out there that can truly satisfy it. It gives us a picture that desire knows no limits. Those who are wise enough to see this will transcend desire. There are many things to say about Aquarius that needs to be expressed first before we can describe this grip. Aquarius is to Leo as Delilah is to Samson. Recall, Samson is the power emanating from sunlight. Aquarius is the power emanating from darkness. Its statement for Aquarius is, I am darkness. Delilah was a stranger in a strange land and insecure. She gravitated to Samson for stability and security. He was a candidate to be her god. But first, if he is to be considered as a god, he must be tested. She was coerced by the lords of Saturn to reveal the secret of his strength. If the secret of his strength is his ego, then he wasn't connected to God. So she persisted until she found the secret of his strength. When he finally told her, he lost his strength in the process. Delilah destroyed Samson by taking his light. Aquarius deals with the space outside the solar system, the realm of Leo. She represents the realm of darkness, the void, freedom from ego. It is the nature of surrounding space to fill the void. If the Leo is truly connected to spirit, it should fill the void with his light. If, however, he is coming from ego, then he will not be able to fill the void, showing that he is not a god. Thus, the Aquarian seeks to determine who the gods are. If you identify with a god, then she will test you. There is an automatic reaction when they have determined you are not a god. Repulsion. The Aquarian likes to think he is on a quest of freedom. However, his reaction is always repulsion, 180 degrees from any source of light. This is not freedom, though, because it is predictable. What the Aquarian is rebelling against is the law of Saturn and the Earth. He is the outlaw that desires a reality free of all laws. Thus, anything that smacks of Saturn's laws, and he repels it. Aquarians are the inventors because they break Saturn's laws. These laws are consensually agreed upon by the fathers of science. Everyone obeys these laws, for it would look bad for the ego to think outside the box. Everyone would look down on you for such thoughts. It is through rebellion that new directions are taken, leading to new discoveries and inventions. However, the Aquarian must learn the laws of Saturn first before he can choose which one to break. He must climb the mountain of Capricorn before he can fly off in his new, unique direction. He can be a fool or insane, depending on his resistance to outer forces. Aquarians are extremely sensitive to others' egos. Since the masculine is projected, the void brings in other egos. Their sensitivity to other egos brings on rebelliousness. However, until they climb up the Capricorn mountain, their senses can fool them. So all too often, they rebel when they shouldn't or don't when they should. Aquarians are well known for giving mixed messages. Part is attraction and the rest repel. Their task is to find a point where attraction meets repulsion. Until he can define that point, his interactions will contain mixed messages. Aquarius is an air sign, and like Libra, deals with mirrors. In Libra, the object sees itself, flaws and all. However, there is Venus to make it pretty. Aquarians create a negative, a shadow side. For some, this may be an unconscious response to Libra mirrors. They paint the opposite. In many cases, it could be harsh. Ideally, it is for evolution, a synthesis in Gemini. In ancient times, villagers had idiots. He would do the opposite of whatever was the consensus. When he started making sense, it marked the time to re-examine their course. In climbing the mountain of Capricorn, the Aquarian must be free himself from duality. Opening the third eye, which is freedom from duality, is the goal of Aquarius. Once achieved, it is possible to see ego in others. He sees the areas of others' unconsciousness, the secret of their strength. People's aura is visible when the third eye is open. These messages are often in conflict with what other consciousness expressing, leading to mixed messages. The other side is projecting one thing while intuitively the Aquarian is picking on something indifferent. These mixed messages can be very frustrating for the Aquarian. It brings on a repulsive force. It is a signal that the object is not coming from spirit. The Aquarian lives in the invisible realm so that he can observe the fly on the wall. The more invisible he becomes, the less he distorts the observed. Through invisibility, the Aquarian becomes a film emulsion agent, a fixer that photographs the moment when the object shows ego. The photograph expresses the ego in the object, creating an irreversible change in their relationship. The current scientific paradigm would like us to believe that every effort has a cause. This would create a reality where there is no choice because every cause would be predetermined. However, if an object becomes invisible, a void, then information enters, creating an event with no apparent cause. This causes a mutation, a change in a new direction. This happens when the Aquarian is invisible and without ego. This mutation by spirit causes an alchemical change in the organism. Gurdjieff used this technique in shocking his students at the moment when he sensed they were going unconscious. By shocking them, they made irreversible changes in their personality. We see this illustrated in healing. The healer must become invisible and let the spirit do the work. The entrance of spirit into the diseased body renders a healing. The mutation opens up a new path for evolution. This is how inventions are created and how one individual changes society. When one cell makes a change, it becomes easier for the next and the next until they all change. Aquarian energy follows the path of a pendulum. The pendulum swings back and forth and stops momentarily at the extremes. At each point, there is a moment of timelessness, a point of eternity. This is the point between breathing in and breathing out. That moment allows an escape into the higher planes of consciousness. It filters into our mind as intuition. This is the sixth sense of intuition, a gift for the Aquarian. This gift is the trine to Gemini, which is on the cusp of the fifth house. The planetary thinking mind has a new source besides just the senses. These thoughts have no causality within this dimension. The gift is the ability to see the shadows in objects. This is, in essence, the opening of the third eye and the initiation into psychic abilities. The synthesis resulting from this gift is Aries on the cusp of the third house. This is a new direction in opposition to the current system. When it perceives something negative, it responds in the opposite direction. You can call it a new force, a desire for freedom in the opposite direction. This opposing force is the catalyst for creative thinking regarding the synthesis and a quantum jump. By becoming a projection to whatever is opposite, it sets up the dynamics for synthesis. Aquarius has Leo on the cusp of the seventh house and is the energy projected out. They seek out darkness so as to observe the Leo, the sun. The dyad of Aquarius to Leo is played out the Samson and Delilah myth. Samson had godlike superhuman qualities that no man could defeat him. His enemies were always plotting to find a way to remove him of his power. But no one was ever able to get close enough to kill him. If they came with a sword, they would be defeated. The only solution, use Venus, the goddess of love, to get close to him and find his secret. She had to be so weak that she would pose no threat. Recall, Samson destroys all competitors and only loves the weak and the helpless. Delilah was the answer. She was a stranger in a strange land. No friends, no one to trust. She was totally alone. Her job as a servant of his enemy was to find his secret. The constant urging to tell his secret reminds me of Satan tempting Jesus in the desert. If you are truly connected to God, then show me your connection. She finally wore him down and he told her his secret. When she shaved him, he lost his strength and was defeated. He lost his connection to the programmer's hard drive. The battle between Samson and Delilah played out with the wars between Napoleon and later Hitler against the Aquarian country, Russia. Let me see the secret of your strength was her war plan. By retreating, she allowed the solar powers to expand, weakening the communication routes. Eventually, they were extended so far they were vulnerable to cutting off their supplies, leading to their demise. The Vietnam War showed the U.S. the power of Aquarius. All its military might was lost to the Vietnamese people that had no military might except determination. The U.S. forces ruled the day, but were vulnerable at night. Despite the fact that the U.S. won every battle, they lost the war. Delilahs are insecure. They feel ill-equipped to deal in this world. Their kingdom is not on this plane. They need the light of the sun to guide them on their way towards freedom. Yet the sunlight must be tested to determine if it is real. In this test, they invariably weigh down the Samsons, since everything in sunlight casts a shadow. Wherever there is sunlight, they seek the opposite in darkness. Delilah's must learn to find her own inner light, just as Samson must learn that the source of his strength does not lie within him. Until this happens, the two will keep projecting and they keep victimizing each other. Again, it is Saturn's job to bring choiceless awareness between being in the light and bringing forth the energy in darkness. Observe the purity of light in others. In this script, Scorpio is on the 10th house cusp and is the energy needing protection by Saturn. Somehow Saturn must use Scorpio energy to bring about a balance. Usually the Aquarian can easily detach from the inward drawing power of the Scorpio. His power is derived from detaching from such power. Air has power over water by freezing it. The Aquarian can easily say, "I am not playing your silly game," and wander off into the world. However, Scorpio is the solvent that dissolves the barriers that prevent the light from coming through. Without that solvent, the Aquarian is locked out in darkness. The usual game between the Scorpio and the Aquarian is, "Come, catch me." The Aquarian flashes a little stimulus, and the Scorpio chases him. He is like a bullfighter. Now you see the stimulus and now you don't. What Saturn does is create a reality where there is no longer any Scorpios to chase him, so there is no more game. The result is that the Aquarian becomes so invisible that no one can see him. He is locked out of this universe. When the Aquarian feels locked out, then he is embracing the in portion of this grip. The Aquarian in need seeks Taurus on the cusp of the 4th house. Taurus deals with innocence and the means to be attractive for others to seek out. The gift of the inside is the trine to Virgo and the ability to bring the Venus energy into the physical body, making it attractive. This is the force that Psyche had, making her so attractive that no mere mortal could woo her. Without this attractive force, the Aquarian is dark, gloomy, and lead-like. Virgo is the judgment mind and is the force that destroys the Yang's grip. Without this energy, the Aquarian becomes so negative that he sees negativity with all the sun gods. Virgo, when it's gone too far, leads to loneliness. What is lost is Pisces on the cusp of the 2nd house, which he values the most. This is the illusion to cover up the unconscious with something pretty. The Aquarian wants desperately to be loved, but everywhere he sees is unconsciousness. The Aquarian becomes disillusioned. He has become so skilled in seeing the shadow in his brothers and sisters, his repulsion actually leads to loneliness. The synthesis is Cancer on the cusp of the 6th house. What the Aquarian draws is fear and insecurity. He becomes frightened because his detachment has left him totally alone. Eventually, the increased amount of fear can become so desperate that he is forced to take a risk so as to capture some sunlight and become the Leo. As in the case with all the fixed signs, the more they use the Yang script, the more it escalates to the point where he needs to stop doing it or it will kill him. The more he detaches, the scarier it gets because it kills him or forces him to take the risk to get in the sunlight. The Aquarian finds himself too alone for his consciousness and must take a risk to get back into the sun. The Aquarian feels out of step in this world and cries out for help, except he is so invisible that no one hears him. The only solution is to take a risk, be the fool, and jump the cliff into matter. The outcome, whether it is successful or not, isn't important. The Aquarian must get on a stage and accept the light. The square of Aquarius to Taurus is the heart of the Aquarius script. The issue of a person that grows too old to play out his consciousness. It is Uranus after the castration. How he can get his innocence back. What happens when you get too old to have a projection that would bring stimulus that you should have had observed earlier in life? How many old people would love to have one more round on the merry-go-round? The conflict leads to Aquarians back into the world so as to take a risk, become the fool, and wildly jump off the cliff back into the world. Many become so numb that they do anything to feel anything, to feel something. What risk do they take to feel something? To invent something means turning your back on all that is known and jumping into the darkness and being looked upon as a fool. Many become the inventors. Others jump to their death. Those that make a successful jump are rewarded with charisma and Taurus. Time is an important variable in the script. Picture the Aquarian as the older person and trying to understand the world of an innocent child. Time for the child seems to be much slower than for an older person. It is likened to rolling out of toilet paper. Near the end, that roll is really moving. Older years just fly by. As a result of gaining consciousness, the Aquarian can pack in more reality per unit of time than the innocent child. This is why the Aquarian who gains high consciousness gets bored in the realms of the mundane world. In order to see the impressions missed in youth, he has to slow down time in order to experience that impression. He has to become an innocent child to experience these impressions. In fact, the Aquarian may feel compelled to steal youthful innocence from the child, the fountain of youth. This desire for innocence can often lead to dangerous realities. I feel that children abducted and sexual abuse is conducted by people who have lost their time-space connection and strive to get it back by stealing it from children. There is an epidemic of vampires that want the blood of the innocent. It goes way beyond the need for sex. This is not a new phenomenon. Historically, witches and sorcerers have often destroyed innocence to steal its essence. We are living at a time when it is very easy to get out of step with today's fast-paced society. Life today is so structured that one can easily fall out of sync at a very young age, resulting in an epidemic of isolated people. The feeling of being on the outside looking in can initiate the desire to steal it from the innocent. Another way the Aquarian can regain the innocence of youth and slowing down time is through the use of drugs. Many use drugs to escape to reality. Not so for the Aquarian. He wants to slow down time so as to experience a time of innocence, so as to gain consciousness. Depending on the degree of risk the Aquarian wants to take will determine the toxicity of the drug. Drugs comes in all flavors and little kick with high danger to great kick with high risk. The Aquarian script can be quite negative, so far out of step that it can become quite depressing. They may doubt their reality because of their increased sensitivity what they observe. There is ultimately a disillusionment with the now in the world and gives a desire to be free of it all. This is the divine discontent. The Buddha was at this point when he completely surrendered to any worldly desires, even the desire for enlightenment. It was only then that he was able to make a quantum jump. The positions of Saturn and Uranus are, as well as their aspects to other planets, have a big bearing on how this script plays out. Planets in the sign of Aquarius and Taurus will be influenced by this script, as are planets in Aquarius trine Gemini and Taurus trine Virgo will be affected. Again, examining the numbers, Aquarius is 11. That reduces to 2 and Taurus. Delilah stripped off the mask of a god and exposed him to be a mere mortal, while Psyche pulled off the mask of a mortal and exposed a god. Both signs deal with pulling off a mask, one exposed a god, the other a mortal. There is an opposite effect between 11 and 2. The number 11 is very intuitive. In fact, it is the most intuitive of all numbers. They are sensitive and have a great understanding of others and can sense without what is going on behind the scenes. They have a gift of intuition and sensitivity to help others. The challenge for 11s is not to be overwhelmed by their gifts. Fear and phobias would be the downside of this number. They may also seem at times indecisive, impractical, nervous, and moody. Because 11s are also 2s, they have the strength to finish what they start. They are spiritually aware, a visionary, inspiring, charismatic, inventive, a dreamer, idealistic, and deep thinker, and rely on faith rather than logic to deal with life and all it has to offer. The figure of justice sits in her chair, cloaked in red, and holding a sword in her right hand and scales in her left. The sword is double-edged, cutting both ways, signifying impartiality. It is point up, signifying victory. The sword in her right hand demonstrates the logical, well-ordered mindset necessary to disperse fair judgment. The scales in her left, an intuitive hand showing that logic must be balanced by intuition. Justice reflects the search for truth. You need to know and speak the truth and perceive it in the words and deeds in others. Be fair and just with all you, and you will soon be able to detect dishonesty in yourself and others. Sodium 11 is the second alkali metal under lithium 3. It offers a very heated relationship with oxygen, so much so that he is barred from being within the cell. He is locked out. Sodium combined with chlorine forms the salt making up the great ocean and provides transport for information from the programmer's hard drive. Recall, electricity is a product created when an ether is disturbed, producing a masculine dielectric and a feminine magnetic field. As previously mentioned, the CSP has little understanding of AC electricity because their teaching claim only 2 variables. However, to understand the sine curve as arranged by the season, 4 variables are needed: the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices. Power derived from AC current requires the acceleration of one or the other. This is achieved by turning one off at the equinox and turning it back on at solstice. This creates the sine curve and the power derived from the process. What happens when the process is interrupted? It resulted in great explosions. It took Steinmetz to work out the process. Tesla took advantage of this situation and discovered impulse power. In the AC curve, the magnetic field is turned back on at the first square, the North Pole. Tesla learned by not turning the magnetic field on that the ether was disturbed. It provided an impulse of energy in attempts to fill the void. Tesla was a master of switches, with such that he could go between the North Pole to the South Pole and back again, producing impulse power. This form of electricity doesn't need wires to transport the energy. This form could be pumped into the ground and anyone around the world could tap into the producing available energy. However, the controllers wouldn't get rich, so he was stopped. Information comes from the master hard drive and somehow creates an independent creation. Recall, the speed of new consciousness was planted at the winter solstice, the birth of fire enclosed in the barrier of Saturn, 1-0. In Aquarius, its opposite is created from the ether to balance the fire, -1. A matching entity of air encapsulates the seed. The pair is allowed to gestate, Pisces, awaiting a birth in Aries. The gestation creates the code of karma which the produced entity becomes. I hope you enjoyed this session regarding Aquarius, Uranus, and the number 11. This is the energy which creates an event horizon, opening a gateway for the admittance of ether and the master hard drive. The final session deals with Neptune 12 and the Pisces script. Until then, be happy.